right, it is 4 o'clock and we are on the air, so we'll go ahead and get started with the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, September 28th, 2023. I appreciate all of you that are here, being here, and everybody watching at home on YouTube. We've got 3 items on the agenda today. Before we start, I'm going to read off an event that's coming up regarding the Bridge by Bridge bond that's coming up for a vote on October 10th. There's a community meeting on October 4th here at City Hall from 5:30 to 6 p.m. There'll be an overview and presentation, and then from 6 to 7 will be a Q&A session with city staff. And passage of this proposition would provide essential funding to replace and rehabilitate up to 18 bridges in our community. The city of Norman is solely responsible for the maintenance of 80 bridges across 189 square miles. And outlined projects would touch every ward in Norman. And reminder that early voting starts on October 5th and 6th next week. So definitely encourage everybody that's interested in this program and learning more information before you cast your vote to attend that meeting on October 4th. Again, here at City Hall, starting at 5:30 p.m. And after that, we'll go ahead and get started with our first item on the agenda, which is our public transit ridership report and a discussion about the route changes that we got coming up.
I appreciate that, Chair and council members. I'm going to go through the regular report that we usually have, along with the ridership of the fixed route and embark system. And then we've added the on-demand service. We added a short report there for our first 4 weeks of service, so we'll dive into that in a little bit, and then I have a short presentation on the route changes that we can go over. So first, in our memo, I just, and this will kind of be covered in the route changes a little bit, but we are in the tidy up stage, I believe, of the transit center. So they're putting the finishing touches on it and starting to clean up and making it, getting all the dirt off everything that they created. So I'm really excited that we're in that stage, especially because the changes are right around the corner. So work is continuing, but definitely is more of you know, putting we went through our punch list on Monday, so just finding those little details that were overlooked or that need to be looked at again. So very exciting. And if you go by there, it's looking really good. You probably can't miss it if you walk by or drive by. It's very, very blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For grants, with council support, we're submitting grants to ACOG for their air quality small grant and the public fleet conversion grant. We appreciate the approval of those resolutions.
And I would note, Taylor, if you heard the same thing I heard from Mr. Sharp at ACOG today about the Oklahoma City metro area is this close to, we failed our air quality test 2 years in a row, and we're this close to getting in trouble, I guess. So.
Yeah, we've been talking about that for a few years, and I'll briefly touch on that ACOG monitors with 2 or 3 air quality monitors around the metro, and we have a certain level we have to adhere to. And as he said, 3 years in a row we did really well, and then the last 2 years we've went over that mark. So,
yes.
And there's cost to that. I won't get into it, but they've looked into that, and costs to development are added on just with non-attainment. Other metros have gone through this process of. So anything we can do, they send out air quality alerts telling the community, hey, it's ozone alert day, please don't mow, try not to fill up your cars if you can, because emissions come out of the pump whenever you fill up. So just little things like that. But yeah, I'm sure we'll hear more about that later on. But transit can be a big part of the solution for that. So
Absolutely.
Hopefully people will consider taking the bus to help curb some of that and mitigate some of that. So. And that's really what some of those grants are for, and I think that's why you touched on that. So for our air quality small grant, we're looking at additional bus stop installations, and also for those overhead or pantograph charges for the electric buses to run all day. So that way we don't have to worry about them having to go back to the yard to charge whenever their batteries get a little bit lower than we would like. So we're pretty hopeful that those grants will be approved along with other ones that we're submitting for other projects throughout the city. Microtransit, again, we have a report in our memo about that, so I won't dive into that here. And then vehicles, we are, I'm hoping that this giant blurb of vehicles that we keep on this memo will start shrinking as we accept vehicles and get them into service. We got 5 of the large CNG buses over the last couple months and have them all in service now. So I'll probably take those off at the next memo, and then some of the others are starting to trickle in. So should be about 17 vehicles this fiscal year. They kind of all just came at once, even though we've ordered them at separate times. They just had separate production schedules, so we're pretty excited about that. And then I just want to briefly touch about the ridership. It was a great fixed route August for Embark Norman. We had 33,000 rides provided on Monday through Friday and 3,000 on Saturday. And you can see the comparison there in the ridership report, but we'd had just over 20,000 for last August for Monday through Friday. And we almost doubled the Saturday numbers from last August. So pretty good showing. Very excited. We continue to rebound from COVID. And again, we haven't had really a COVID year as a city operation, or a COVID-free year of city operation. So we're pretty excited that we keep continuing to increase those numbers. I just want to point out that the average total daily ridership was over 1,400 in August, which is the highest I've seen since I've been here. It's fairly high for our system. So hopefully that'll continue.
What's that total percent increase this year so far in ridership?
It is year to date. It's 51%. So
I want
it's
to make sure I was reading that correctly.
Yeah, fiscal year to date ridership is 68,000 passengers and is a 51.66 increase over year to date last year of 45. So
over a 50% increase in ridership in our total transit system in the last year.
correct.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah.
And there's a lot more metrics as always in that performance report, but since we're diving into the route changes, I won't hit on all of them. I do want to mention the first on-demand performance report, somewhat similar in its look as the Embark one, but a few different metrics we're trying to pull out here. So we start off the report by just going over what the service is and how it operates. That's all on our websites and people can see it, but generally late night service Monday through Saturday with daytime service on Sundays. First 6 rides are free if you download the app and create a login, and then it's $2 per ride after that, with $1 if you have an extra passenger going with you. And then due to our collaboration with OU, we have the Safe Ride aspects that allow OU students using their OU email address during the Safe Ride hours, which are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. to ride fare free, which is what they've done for the last 20 years or so.
I know that I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but since we're talking about like how the fare structure is, I noticed further down that they're currently not able to distinguish between the emails. They're saying under the program engagement and rider growth.
Yeah.
We're not able to differentiate between OU student accounts and others. So, but they're looking into what
Well-
that is. So we don't have numbers on
Yeah,
who's utilizing Safe Ride at this point?
they're manually pulling that for us, but it wasn't just readily available as a report in their dashboard. But they're working on it. That's just something that other communities and areas that they haven't had a relationship like ours.
So it's
they want
just
that
a
data.
metric that they're not pulling, but like they can, in the system, they know.
They
who-
know, yeah.
Okay, so like whenever the fares are operating appropriately, it's just the metrics on
It's
the
just
data on the other
It's just
side.
the back end of
Got it.
easily pulling it. So we're hoping
that makes sense.
that'll be more readily available for us in the
Got it.
future. So this is a first report. I hope it gets I hope it gets more refined in the next few months. So just hitting on a few, the key measures that we wanted to look at are at the bottom of the first page. That's what we set out in the RFP. People are average walking distance of 0.08 miles, which we had a target of 0.1. Maximum, we only wanted people to walk a quarter of a mile. Some people, the maximum that we could identify in that 4-week period was 0.32 miles, so someone had to walk that far, but it's generally due to the average. You can see most people are not having to walk that far. Generally, people are having to wait around 16 and a half minutes, which our target was less than 15. I think that'll smooth out over time as they optimize the service, but that's why we'll monitor it. And then the maximum rider wait time, we originally had a 20-minute target that got a little fuzzy with including OU because in the system we can propose rides up to a certain amount. So if you request a ride and it's going to be, we could set it at 20 minutes, but then that doesn't give you the choice if you want to wait on the ride. So during Safe Ride hours, OU wanted the students to be able to choose, so it was set at 2 hours. So the ride could be 2 hours out, and that's why it's a little skewed. So I'm trying to hone in on that metric so it makes more sense for our purposes, and that way the data isn't skewing it. So, but for the general community, we set that at 45 minutes, so you can make the choice if you want to wait on that ride if it's outside of your comfort level. So, but generally, people are having to wait 16 and a half minutes. So it's just during those peak times that it might be a little higher. And then percentage of ride requests completed within 20 minutes is, we wanted it greater than 80%. It's at 70%. Again, I think that'll smooth out and get higher as we get farther than 4 weeks in. And VIA figures out where more vehicles and drivers need to be in which days. Moving to the second page briefly, just on rider experience, I want to point out that on average we have a 4.9 out of 5 stars. That you complete your ride, they ask for a rider rating, and that's really good for our system, I think. And then we've had over 1,600 app accounts created since we launched, and just over 250 of those are repeat riders, and I think that'll continue to grow too. So.
Councilman Schumer.
Do we have any indication on, like, I know that the first 6 rides are free. So do we have any indication if, like, within these metrics, like, how many users have already used up their 6 rides and are starting to pay the fees? Do we have any idea?
I can probably look at that.
Just
That's
curious.
one of the things that we haven't looked at probably. So, how many people are going past their 6 free rides?
Yeah, so that they're already starting into the fare service.
Okay.
Paying.
Yeah, who's paying and, like, how is that going?
Okay. Yeah, we'll look at that.
And how long are we gonna continue to allow, is it the first 6 rides for anybody ever?
When you sign
Moving
up.
forward?
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
Just-
it's not, we're not time bound.
No,
to
we
that.
can set that if we want, but we decided to leave it open for any new
Okay.
user.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's good.
Any more questions on demand?
Let's see. So the pilot program will end in August if we don't,
Next August, yeah.
next August if we don't spend. And before then or after then, when would we ideally start discussing whether we wanted to keep it going, if we wanted to alter hours of it, or service boundaries and things like that? I've assumed it'll just be a continual conversation the whole time, but I have had questions about adjusting hours already and
Yeah,
things like that.
anytime people have suggestions or comments, please send them our way so we can keep track of them. That's the only way we're gonna know whether we need to look at that. I mean, other than, yeah, that's really the only way. If people are wanting service outside of what we're providing, the only way is comments either through the app or through email or through you all.
So
if you
the
get 'em.
app does have the ability for users to leave feedback.
I believe so through the ride rating when you're done, yeah.
Okay.
But even if they don't, please email us, or call you all, and please pass that along. We're gonna keep track of those, and then, yeah, I think it'll be a continual conversation. When we really feel strongly that we have hey, we should look at this, we might bring that to you for suggestion on changing the service. And I think for sure 6 months in, maybe January, we'll say, here's where we're at, how are we feeling? Because, at that point, we're really deep into budget, and we gotta start deciding what we're gonna do, so.
And is there a way to identify how many ADA riders that are using it?
Yeah, we could start pulling that out if you would like.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we can move on to the route changes.
Okay, yeah, moving on to the route changes. So we are getting really close, and it's really exciting. We are embarking on a change I think very little places in the country do. I mean, complete overhaul of our system, new transit center. Just 4 years, a little over 4 years in of us taking over the service. So thank you for council support and the community support these last few years in vehicle grants, purchasing the building, remodel, the funding for that, and then just also the funding to get the long-range transit plan, the Go Norman Transit Plan developed so we could have these route changes in our strategic plan and on our available for us to go forward with the changes. So I'm just going to briefly go through some background. I think it's worth mentioning how we got here. Again, July 1, 2019, we transferred the operations of the city transit side over from OU. About a year in, once we felt like we were actually in a good place somewhat, we started working on our long-range transit strategic plan with Nelson Nygaard. And then a year after that, June of 21, a lot of community engagement and data collecting and back and forth with city staff and council. Council unanimously adopted the Go Norman Transit Plan. And then it really took us about another year to digest it and, okay, well, what are we going to do? Obviously, it lays out what we're going to do, but how are we going to tackle it? And it has a lot of recommendations in it, including additional frequency Sunday service, which we actually accomplished somewhat with the on-demand service. I'm excited to see how that pans out. That'll help inform us on that. But expanded service, it has a lot of recommendations. But the first recommendation was overhauling the route network, making a recommended route network based on the feedback and the way the community's changed over the last 20 years. And it was important to me to be able to come to you all with that recommended route network that really wasn't a budget disaster. I didn't feel comfortable coming to you saying, hey, we need $3 million to make the transit system better. So what can we do with the budget, the drivers, and the vehicles we have? And that's where we landed on that route change. And this past September, it's September a year ago. I'm losing my years, but a year ago we asked council to approve us to go out and ask the community what they thought about those route changes. We wanted to look at implementing those. And we did that over October, November. We got some good feedback. We had 3 public meetings. People could participate by sending in comments, calling in. And overall, we got 41 official comments, I would say. That's people calling, emailing, and then at the meetings. And then on December 13th, we packaged all that engagement up, put it in a report and asked council if they would like to approve the service changes to be implemented, and council approved those last December. So since then, we've been working to change the routes, a lot of implementation work in the background. We were hoping to do it by August, but unfortunately, there were some factors at the transit center and some other things that kind of led us to slide to October 16th, which is the current identified day. And just a brief summary of the service changes. Again, we're going to have a new Norman Transit Center at 320 East Comanche, old Chase Bank building. I just can't believe how great of a reuse it was. I mean, anything else that would have gone there would have to tear the building down, I think. Maybe not, but it's just amazing. And thank you, Councilmember Holman, for pointing it out a couple years ago whenever we went to purchase it, or when we were looking at a home. All routes will be reconfigured, which has their opportunities and challenges, obviously. And then the aspect of bidirectional routes. So we've talked about this before, a route going out from the transit center, having a short turnaround at its furthest point and then coming back the same direction. It's more operationally efficient, but it also makes more sense usually for passengers because they don't have to understand the entire loop. They know it goes out one way and back the other. You can get off, do your business, cross the street, and go back the same way. You don't have to ride the entire route again to get back to where you were going. And then again, challenges where some route segments were discussed and decided on to be eliminated or realigned, and we had both retired and new bus stops that resulted from that. Oops, keep hitting the arrow and it keeps taking me back. So, New Norman Transit Center. I should have got a real picture, but it's going to it looks really close to that bottom rendering there. You can see the top, what it looked like before we started. And we're currently utilizing OU's Brook Street Transfer Station. It's probably the last big piece that we're still collaborating on with OU, other than just routes in general, making sure people can make connections. Purchase property, again, at Councilmember Holman's suggestion, we had in April 22, council approved a purchase sale agreement, and shortly after that, we actually purchased it. And then about a year later, we had the designs done, we hired the contractor and began the remodel work in March, and with the goal of getting it done by this fall. A lot of improvements for passengers and staff. We're gonna have an indoor waiting area for passengers to escape the heat and the cold. We'll also have an outdoor seating area if they don't want to go inside or for some reason it's being cleaned or something like that. So nice shade structure outside, benches, trash cans. We'll also have a restroom for the public and restrooms for staff, a break room for staff. Right now, we don't have any interior location for people to do any of those activities. And then something I think near and dear to our heart, Councilmember Holman, is the water access, a water fountain and a water bottle filling station. We tried for years to get something at Brook Street, and it just the utility cost was
I remember
abnormal.
a $50,000 water fountain. Is
Right.
what it was going to cost to
So we were-
put a pipeline through that parking lot.
We were
Yeah.
trying to get grants to put in a water fountain. I mean, it was funny, but I'm glad that we're at this point where we can provide that service to, basic amenities, really.
Absolutely.
So very exciting about that. Ribbon cutting press release went out today, October 12th at 2:30. Anybody that wants to come, please do so. It's going to be very exciting. And then with the route changes the following Monday, obviously October 16th. Gosh, I keep hitting that arrow. And going over the routes, I'm not going to go into every sector because I think this is more of a refresher, and with more information on the website for folks. But the current routes are on the left. You can see what I was talking about earlier with the larger looped system that we had, where folks had to get on and off and ride a route all the way around whether they needed to or not. And so one of the big changes that was recommended with the long-range plan was to make the routes bi-directional. You can imagine with the same amount of hours, drivers, buses, inherently that's going to result in some places losing service or people having to walk a little bit farther. So there are some places that service was adjusted and bus stops were retired and bus stops were added as well. So this map right here, and this is an interactive map on the website, so it looks busy on this as a static map, but people can zoom in and out on the website. It shows where all the current plus the new bus stops will be. That's the ones that are colored like the routes. And then the black ones are the retired ones around town. So you can kind of see where those areas were decided on where service should be shifted and or recommended to be shifted. So happy to talk about that a little bit if we need to.
My real only concern about the changes, again, will be the East Lindsay route, since it's our busiest route,
Yep.
and the one that may have the most changes happening to it, as far as existing stops changing. So I would definitely want us to keep an eye on the Brooks and 12th area, and then the Biloxi area, and if we're able to direct those folks to the on-demand system or whatever it may be. Because, there just wasn't a real good, in those meetings we had, there wasn't a real good way to reconfigure that route without disrupting some heavily used stops.
Yeah.
And I think one of the benefits of the new route is that it does go quite a bit further east than to the Brandywine, where it did not before. So I'd say like a quarter of a mile maybe further east than it did before. So that is helpful. And there's a bunch of apartments over there too.
Yeah.
So that's the only kind of like apprehension I've had about the changes has really been that route, and for those specific reasons.
We're on the same page, right? There's many nights I've spent thinking about this as I fell asleep, and I'm not joking about that. There's a lot of, again, these are big, bold changes, and I'm not just saying that. It's something that our community, we should have done incrementally over time, and now we're doing it in one swath, which is somewhat painful, right? But I couldn't have said it better myself. We can get into the minutia if we need to, but if we would have just went up and down Biloxi and Beaumont here, there's existing stops here that we would have had to discontinue and people would have had to walk. So it's trade-offs, but definitely the area here was one of those harder decisions, one of those that we knew we'd not make some people happy about. I wish I would have kept the walk shed map in this presentation. So I have a map that I put a 1/4 mile buffer, just a circle around each bus stop, that showed generally what people are willing to walk. Some people are more comfortable walking a 1/4 mile or more or less, right? But generally a 1/4 mile is what people are willing to walk to and from bus stops, is what people have found. And while there's still some areas that don't reach that 1/4 mile, generally there's a lot of these retired bus stops that the areas are still within walking distance. And again, if it's 100 degrees, my 1/4 mile gets closer to 0 miles, right? But it's still within that hopefully metric of comfortable walkability.
Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, this is, I mean, obviously one of the things that has been the biggest, I guess, heartburn about changing over to the new routes and things. And I'm hopeful, kind of like Councilmember Holman said about, the on-demand microtransit option now being an overlay that, can help maybe ease some of the challenges that some people have. And if people are outside of that, 1/4 mile walking to a bus stop, or, need ADA vehicles, like they can't travel the 1/4 mile. So is there any, I guess, outreach that we're currently doing to those areas that are going to have retired stops to explain that we do have this other option?
Well, there's outreach, and definitely we're providing that as another option if we get it, as we get into conversations. And that's actually the next slide, is what we're doing as outreach. But I just want to briefly mention that there are obviously the Go Norman Transit Plan has bigger expectations, added frequency, added routes. So as we get into, once we get over this hurdle, as we get into future budget requests and things like that, we'll start making discussions about added routes and things. But one of the added routes we talked about was out to the East Side Library, and it would go along Alameda here and dip back down actually and serve this Triad Village area again, Triad Village and 12th, and then go back up and continue on Alameda out here. I think it's like the 5th priority in the plan, but there are ways to bring service back. It's just this initial service overview and setting us up for those expansions later on is where it is.
Just one more
So I just want to put that out there, that we can certainly start looking at that as we get into future budget years.
Yeah, and then I've heard the conversation kind of reignite in some ways about the route that we used to have out to Little Axe. Is that still something that we're considering in the future? And, I guess what is the cost of having a route that goes out there? And I think people are losing that in the conversation, like how much it will cost to add that extra route. So maybe you can provide some clarity on some of that.
Do you know the used to, like what year that was? Because that was before my time,
So-
and I always hear used to, and
Yeah.
I really
I want
don't
to say
know the last
CART
time we
ended in
provided that.
2014 or 15.
14 or 15, okay. So we could definitely look at that. It's not in the long range plan, but it's something that we could look into. It really becomes a question of, is that something that we're willing, at the cost to provide service to, and I'm not saying one person doesn't make a difference, but
Sure.
the denser areas are obviously better facilitated for large buses. So maybe this is something we could do with the on-demand
Yeah,
service or
that's
something
what I
like
was
that.
gonna
So-
say, like maybe as we think about how the microtransit on demand kind of works and then expanding out into various places based on
Right.
those conversations that we're having.
And when we talk about microtransit, we had this discussion of maybe we should serve everything but Core Norman and feed them into Norman, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things microtransit can do. It's just what flavor do you want it to take, right? So we could definitely talk about that too.
That route to Little X could be in the future, that could be an opportunity to partner with the absentee Shawnee or the Little X School District even, or whatever other entities out there might be interested. That could be a way to get.
Well, and really, what's the demand? Is it they want service twice a day, twice a week, all day long? So that changes the conversation too. Is it a limited service route that they have a high use activity that they want us to serve, get people to and from Norman? Or maybe we would start with that, right? You go to and from Little Axe once in the morning, once in the afternoon, something like that.
I would say too, I was at Moore Norman on Monday for the AV, or for the flight mechanics program thing, and was talking to them about the discussions that have had about extending bus route service up to War Norman, into the North Norman area, county jail area, and War Norman Tech Center area. And then I would assume a potential future southern Norman route could maybe hit 12th Street and hit Brooks again and go south and come back. So that could be a way where we get service back to that area again.
Exactly. So the southeast south route is actually in the plan. It's one of the priorities. It's drawn not to do that, but we could certainly reevaluate that. And then I'll say for more Norman Tech, there is a change to the routes that operate in the northeast to shift some things, but ultimately provide service up to more Norman Technology Center. So that's again a future recommendation.
And what's the current estimate cost per route to add a new route?
I have to go back and look at it. You know, we've with our partners Embark, things change every year with salary increases. You know, we're giving colas and things like that. So I'd have to I want to rerun the numbers before I give you something like that. But
Okay.
I think we get over these changes. We'll see how it works, and then we start talking about what we want to do to fix things here or there, or again make bigger changes and add routes or frequency. Last thing I'll mention on this is the two routes on the west side, so 110 and 112, they will be hour-long routes, but after Sunday service, the first recommendations is to add a bus to each of those routes and make them 30 minutes. That's really easy and something that we can do. I say easy, it's just operating budget and drivers, which drivers are hard to come by. But the cap, if you don't have to put new bus stops in or anything, you just throw another bus and driver on there, right? So, and then after that, I wanted to mention that because the Route 111 and the east side of Norman, or East Lindsay route was the highest ridership, it's an hour-long route, but it's every 30-minute frequency. So there will be two buses on it with the start of service.
So one will be coming back while one's going out. I
Exactly.
guess. Okay.
Mhm. And that's what we envisioned for the other hour-long routes. It's just, again, with the service that we had and the resources we had, this is where we landed on prioritizing our buses and staff. So lastly, summary of recent outreach efforts. We did a refresh of our webpage, and this is, 2 or 3 months out. Refresh of our website for changes with that link to the interactive map. Embark also has some web pages with information that kind of point to each other, but we're making sure we keep the information as easy to get to as possible if people are going to one source or the other. On September 8th, so earlier this month, Jason Huff went out and put up bus stop closure signs on each bus stop that was going to be retired. It's about a 2-foot sign, has a QR code on it, says, hey, changes are coming, this bus stop will be permanently closed. Please reach out for information. There's a phone number, website, and that QR code. So that went out to the 50 or so bus stops. They're still there if you drive around and see them on the poles. We also put flyers posted on each bus to try to get people to see the information and go on and look at it. The next week, I have a running list of stakeholders that I've kept since we started developing the long-range plan and getting feedback, and then feedback last fall for the proposed implementation of the changes. So I just went back to that stakeholder list and said, please share this flyer, send it to your emails and your colleagues and your students, your workers, anybody that you think would be interested in this or may need it. And every time we've done one of these things, we've gotten a flurry of calls, emails. So I think those outreach efforts are working, but inevitably we probably won't catch everybody, but we're doing our best. On September 17th, we had a front page Norman transcript article about the changes. We appreciate that. And then I really appreciate OU taking our request and sending out an OU mass email on September 21st. About 29,000 people get those over the faculty, staff, and students. So again, we had a pretty strong couple days where people were reaching out, asking questions, thankfully. And then I've given a few presentations, Chamber Aviation Transportation Committee, Thunderbird Clubhouse, and League of Women Voters. And in that stakeholder email, when I shared the flyer and the information, the website and everything, I just said, hey, anytime you want me to speak to an individual or group or anything, please let me know and I'm happy to attend. So we're open and available if anybody sees this recording or is hearing live for us to come out. Even though we're about 2 weeks out, we're still happy to come out and talk about it. So we're also planning in the next couple weeks pop-up events at the Brook Street transfer station. So us and Embark staff are going to go out with a tent and information and try to catch riders getting on and off buses and make sure they know about the changes and hear the comments and try to help them out. And then all day on October 16th, on the first day of service, people are going to be ambassadors, is what we're calling them, to help people get to and from the routes that they're maybe not accustomed to, and make sure they know where they're going. And if they didn't know about the changes, walk them through that. So we're going to try to have people there as much as possible at the transit center initially to help with those efforts. So.
So Transit Center opens on Thursday, 2 weeks from today.
Ribbon cutting on
Ribbon
Thursday.
cutting, and then the next day.
Yeah, it'll open on the 16th with the route changes. So.
Okay, the following Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so, perfect, okay. And so the East Lindsay route, that is the connector route for any campus routes. If people riding the campus routes want to get onto the city system, it looks like the East Lindsay route will be the one that's still going by the Brook Street station. Well, it'll be stopping there, it looks like too, so.
Well, we're gonna actually just stop on Brooks.
On Brooks, yeah. We're not
We're
going
not
into
gonna go in.
Okay.
I will say that depending on where you are on campus, the Route 112 will go on the west side. So this is Elm right here and Boyd and University. So we actually have two routes that I would say are connecting to the university depending on where you're coming to and from. And then Campus Depot here at ASP, where they cut off the South Oval and created that big cul-de-sac, is where the majority of the OU routes still converge. So we'll be kind of on either side of that, not going into the Campus Depot, but certainly people can get to and from there. That's a pretty comfortable distance, but that'll be the main connection, I think.
Perfect. All right, yeah, Councilor Schuler.
I'm happy to hear that you're gonna have some people helping when the new routes go into effect. I know that in the past you've done some like ride-alongs with staff or with council or with whatever. Do you have any plans to do that as the new routes come online? Like it might be a good time to get feedback and kind of hear how the transition has been. Maybe not right as the routes come online, but maybe a month or two later to kind of see like how is this working and to get some of us out riding and to kind of hear.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. For one, anytime. If you guys want to go on our bus ride, just feel free to let us know and we'll schedule that and do that. I do need to get back to, hey, for a month, every Friday, I'm going to take this route. If anybody wants to join me, just to try to get people engaged and if they want to come out. But I really mean it. Anytime you guys want to go and ride the bus, please reach out. But yes, once we get over this hump and we kind of breathe a little bit, I think we'll ride the routes a little bit. I will say I don't think we'll have any trouble getting feedback, good or bad, once we start the changes. I don't think we'll need to go on the buses to ask for their.
They'll be coming to you.
Yeah, they'll be coming to us. So I hope it's mostly good, but I think we'll hear from them even if we're not riding with them every day. So. Yeah, that's the important part about being at the transit center, which we may not catch everybody because you may not have to go to the transit center now that the routes are more, if it's, you on the same route that you don't have to go to the transit center, but we'll do our best to catch as many people as we can. And I had on my agenda next steps. I didn't have a next step slide, but really the next step is to do it, right? So October 16th, we're gonna roll this out, and I hope it's well received, and I think we did a lot of planning and discussion, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's a long time coming.
Yeah.
So it's one of the better, or advantages, I think, of us taking over the transit system when we did, was that we get to have a direct say in what we want to do with it and how it could best serve the city as a whole, instead of it being just focused on one specific area. So I think this is good. So any final comments or anything? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Councilor Nash, did you look over there if you had anything to add or anything? Okay. Well, thank you very much, staff. I appreciate it. Again, anybody that's interested in public transit in Norman, we discuss the ridership numbers and projects and changes every month in this committee at 4 p.m., fourth Thursday. So you're all welcome to attend or watch on the City of Norman YouTube the replay. So send us your questions or comments if you have any about these changes, and we will be sure that they're covered in our upcoming committee meetings. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you. And thanks for indulging me as we made our way through all three of those things.
Absolutely. All right, item number 2 on the agenda is an update on the 2019 Transportation Bond Program, voter-approved bond program, and we have Scott and staff here to talk about it.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here to do this. We did this a couple of years ago, and we came through with some changes that have been really beneficial. And today we want to show you kind of where we have landed with those changes as we've gone through them, and then show you about what we think some of our next steps are to keep this bond program moving, trying to make sure that we're delivering things on time, in budget, and moving forward. So we definitely appreciate your time to be able to do that today. We have lots of people here today that are very familiar with this. Of course, we have Sean O'Leary, our director, there in the back of the room, myself. We have David Riesland, who helps us a lot out with the transportation. Tim Miles, our capital projects manager, is here. And then Tim DeAndre, our capital projects engineer, actually isn't in today because he's taking care of issues out on active job sites. And then also with if you remember back when we did this, it was a very large program. We decided to be very advantageous to us to have a program manager. And with that, we hired Olson and Liesl Polward and Kevin Bloss are here today. And Liesl's going to be taking some of the heavy lifting here and explaining some of the big changes that we made. So we're going to be tag teaming this a little bit. I want to start off with a little plug of my own here. We still have our normanstreets.com website up, which gives you current information on projects. So if you have questions about projects, a good place to start. We welcome you to look at that, and it also tells you there's a place here where you can leave comments. So if there's something you've got a thought about or something you'd like to see or a question, it comes back to us through Olson, and then we can respond to those. I'm going to be very brief about the history of the program, but just for a refresher and for those who may not know, back in April 2nd of 2019, the voters of Norman approved this bond program. It was a total of $139 million, 72 million in bonds, and then federal funds. We were going to go out and get federal funds for all these projects for about 67 million. This was a program where we were not going to have to increase taxes. We were just going off some current structure that we had there to be able to do that. We had identified 19 projects, and we came up with those through a lot of different ways. Some were in our 2014 Comprehensive Transportation Plan. We also had input from council. Several of the projects were direct input from council as we were developing the program. And then we also had citizens who were giving ideas and thoughts about what we should do. As I said a moment ago, we wanted to use some federal funds to help us extend our money to get a little more bang for our buck. Some of the projects, the Traffic Management Center, widening and reconstruction of roads. We put in some traffic signals, sidewalks, stormwater drainage, multimodal bike paths, a lot of different items we put into that. It was proposed to be a 10-year program, which would put it ending in 2030. Just a quick map of where those projects are located. You can see those bold red lines and blue lines on there. The differentiation there is that the blue lines were the projects that we proposed to be done with bond funds only. And if you remember, when we came with this a couple of years ago, we asked to make some changes to what would be bond only and what would be partially funded with federal funds, based upon what was scoring better so that we could really maximize our funding. As we go through, Liesl's going to walk you through where we are with that and that what's happened and the good news from that. And then we'll be moving forward with some other options and thoughts that we have. So just real quick, to get this money, you have to be in the Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP, and that is through ACOG, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments. That's basically all the municipalities and counties here in Central Oklahoma. There's about $20 million a year available. There's going to be more available this year, which we think is really going to benefit us. We're in the process of looking at our applications for the next year, or actually we're looking for future years because we have 2 locked years. It's looking really favorable. We think we're really going to be able to do well. It's a highly competitive process. It's a score. They take each project, score it, and then that's how the money gets given to the projects. No entity can get more than 56% of that funding. So we can't get it all, Oklahoma City can't get it all, Tuttle can't get it all. So it keeps it from being skewed to one entity too much.
So at ACOG today, Scott, Mr. Sweeney mentioned an event coming up that was, I forget the name of it now, but he said member cities that show up will get 15 extra points on their applications for projects this year, so
Fantastic.
might want to get in touch with ACOG.
We will find out what that is, and then
Yeah.
we will take an Embark
It was
bus
a
if we
10
need to. Do that 15 per person? That would be great.
Yeah, so it was like a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. thing, conference or something.
Safety.
Yeah, maybe something
We,
like that, but
we
we
will
get
make,
extra credit, they said, if anybody, whatever member city show up, so.
we will make sure to check into that and take advantage of anything we can.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of selection criteria. There's a whole guidebook on it. And that's not my expertise. David really takes care of that for us on the transportation projects. And I appreciate the help that he gives us with that. But obviously some of the types of projects there, widening, you can do grade separations like we did. We used this funding to do Robinson Street many years ago. New construction, intersections, resurfacing, widening, bridges, bike lanes, sidewalks, the list goes on and on. And it also does include transit. We've been very successful with our transit program in getting buses and other vehicles for our fleet. And then we also have the safety projects. We're also very active in that. And those have been put together and those are being submitted and reviewed by ACOG also. We were doing really good. We had the whole system figured out and we were probably about the best in the area.
Yeah.
Until FY 2019, they made some changes. And it really kind of hurt our projects. And that was right after we got our bond. It also hurt the projects that we had selected because the projects that had been the bread and butter weren't scoring the way they were. So that's why we had to make this shift in how we were looking for our funding. You can see the changes there, just a lot of them. They changed the scoring. They changed a lot of different items. But one thing that's changing for 2024 is they're bringing back a small component of readiness.
I was gonna have you mention that part, how we used to be number one in shovel-ready projects, and that made a big deal. And then they made it to where cities could, way I understand it, could just submit projects even if they had no plan, no funding, no nothing.
Exactly.
And could
So-
even get awarded even if they didn't.
Yeah, they could get awarded with nothing other than a title on a piece of paper and a line drawing of where it was, I think.
Yeah.
But where we used to be very competitive is that we would be able to show that we'd gone through the steps, and every step that you made, you got more points. And the other thing that helped us with is you're also able to increase your score over time. And then when they took that away, you were static. That was the score of your project. But by adding this 5 points in, if you get to the 60% plan stage, we have a lot of projects that are at 60% plans, and we're ready to go. So we think this is going to be a good benefit to us in this next scoring. This graph is just always so impressive to me, but it kind of shows you over time where we've been. You can see that we average about $5.5 million a year, and that's since 2007. But if you look on that chart, we did really good there, and then FY 2025, we didn't do so well. So we want to recover for that with the next year and get that money funding back up, get things started going again. We have a lot of really good projects that we're scoring and going to be turning in to do that. You can see over 140 transportation projects, and that includes all the safety projects and all the projects that we get to do for about $105 million total. So highly successful, great program that we're happy to have available.
That's just
to
the
us.
federal funding we've received in that
Yes.
time, over $100 million. That's pretty impressive. It's a lot.
We're really grateful for the program, and that's why we spend a lot of time and effort on it every year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Liesl and let her kind of take you through the ins and the outs and where we're at and where we're hoping to go.
Thanks, Scott. So what we're showing here is the full program as it was originally laid out prior to kicking things off and really getting going. And so we wanted to start here. And as you can see, those first 5 projects were shown without any federal funds being planned for those projects. A couple years ago, I got off. We did complete Porter Avenues and Acres Street. That project was completed. It was very successful. It came in $500,000 under budget, which is about 15%. It just goes to show how things were a little bit different when this project was under construction, because things are a little more challenging in the post-COVID world. So as I was alluding to, a couple of years ago, we came to the council, and David and his staff at the city had really determined that these projects, several of them that were planned as not receiving federal funds, were going to actually score really well and had a really good chance to bring that money into the program. And with that, 3 projects did get locked into a federal fiscal year and did receive that federal funding: Jenkins, the Porter Streetscape project, and the Gray Street two-way conversion. The Traffic Management Center was always planned to get federal funds, and it did receive that approval. With those 3 projects, it brought in to the program approximately $9 to $11 million.
If I recall, that Traffic Management Center scored 100 or got 100%, or
That's correct.
it was maybe the top project in the ACOG deal was our.
Never happened. There's never been 100 points for any project.
So our Traffic Management Center, for everybody that's concerned about traffic in Norman and it getting worse, our Traffic Management Center scored 100, I guess, the first time. So
That is
that's how bad
for
it's
sure.
needed.
As Scott said, this program did have challenges with the submittal for the 2025 federal fiscal year, as no projects from this program were approved for funding. So as we look ahead, we've kind of rearranged the order of everything and moved those 4 projects up into the years where they will be constructed. The Porter Avenue Streetscape project is under construction currently right now. Gray Street's on track and will go to bid in November. The Traffic Management Center is going to bid the first quarter of next year, and Jenkins Avenue is expected to bid and then progress to construction starting in the spring of 2024. So also we have accelerated the James Garner Avenue project. It will also go to bid with Gray Street here in November. That one was one of the projects that was always planned to be built with bond funds only, and we have progressed that project as such. It will be funded with the bond funds, and several changes in scope and the inflationary environment of construction in the last couple of years have been a major challenge as we bring in updated estimates and look ahead toward construction on these projects. So it's really important that we got those funds integrated into the program from those 3 projects that did get federal funding.
So James Garner did not get it, or how did that work out?
It did not get awarded the funds. It was submitted, I believe, for both 2024 funds and 2025. The last time it was submitted, it was the top project that did not get funds. It's that horrible situation where, you come in second and you didn't quite get the award, so it was just barely left out.
And we looked at it as a staff and with our program management, we all looked at it, and the idea of trying to postpone that out to try to apply again in 2026 was already a 2022 project. We felt that to be true to the whole process and to what we put out there in the information, that it was just time to get that one under construction and get it started. Let's get that one going. We needed to have those projects out there being completed.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
It
exactly.
scored really high, just not,
High enough.
just barely not.
Just out.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
so close. So for this fall, we've marked all the projects that are being submitted for those 2026 funds with ACOG. I've marked the projects with a star that David has calculated as having the best scores of the ones we are submitting. And the other projects, they may, all of them, there's no guarantee. But we feel like the 3 projects there with the stars have the best chance of receiving these funds. That's the Constitution Street project and the 2 Lindsay Street special corridors.
In addition to these projects, we are also submitting 36th Street Northwest Phase 1, which is still in our 2012. We continue to look for every funding source we can to get that one underway so that we can utilize those funds that we have, that we're just waiting on those federal match to be able to get that project moving
That
forward.
would be Tecumseh to Franklin.
Yeah, past Franklin. It's
Just
actually a little bit
that
past Franklin,
intersection,
so the
yeah.
intersection of Franklin would be complete.
That makes sense to me. That's kind of what I've been thinking is like, if we could just go ahead and do the 1 mile section of it, especially since we don't know what's going to happen north of there. You know, I think so. I think it makes sense to do that, and then that way we've done something. Well, we've been doing a lot, but that there's actual visually something people can look at and say, yeah, we've done.
We agree. It's past time.
So, yeah. But as for those that don't recall, city staff's been applying for funding for that since 2016,
Yes, sir.
and it's been denied every single year. So, and it's a $20 million, if to do the whole 2 miles,
Yes. in
$20
that
million
range now.
project, and it was anticipated all along that I think 80% would be federal funds, and it, at that time in 2012, it maybe would have scored, but now it's not, and that's a lot of money to come up with to do one single project like that, I think. So appreciate the update on that.
For sure. So on this next slide, I've kind of dropped the unstarred marks from this slide. And here I'm highlighting 2 of the projects. They are being submitted for the funding this year, but they're less likely to score as well as the others. But they are both, Cedar Lane Road has progressed past the 60% plans point, and the 60% plans for 36th Avenue Southeast will be submitted just in the next few weeks in October. And so those 2 projects kind of being the next ones on the list, if they happen to not receive funding, we just kind of wanted to step you through what we're proposing to take place in that event. So for those 2 projects, the federal funding that was anticipated was around $12.5 million. And so we need to replace those funds to build those. One thing we really want to look hard at is late in the program, clear planned out in 2028, were Indian Hills Road projects. A widening project of Indian Hills Road, and then some matching funds that the city was going to provide to ODOT to help influence the improvement of that interchange at Indian Hills Road and I-35. As we all know, there is the access program with OTA. There's still a lot going on with that program, but as we're looking down the road, we would have time for those projects. And if things come up and we need to bring them back online, we have until 2028. But also with the insecurity on those projects, we feel like we can progress this program if we leverage that. Let's take something and make it a positive impact into this program. And this would release bond funding to go ahead and fill a gap in construction that we've been looking at for a while.
Well, and I would say too that the interchange one, I mean, we really did that as a token to try to get Costco. We thought a local contribution would entice ODOT to do it faster. And that was my motivation, was to try to get Costco to locate on that corner. And that's not happened, obviously, and I don't see a need unless we're mandated by the law for us to contribute to that interchange any longer. So I'd rather those funds go to these other projects, so. Because I figure they're gonna replace it anyway, or the potential of the turnpike replacing that whole interchange. But the reason that we wanted to contribute is long gone now, so it's, in my opinion, so.
And I think that that is completely valid. So if we look at that, that provides the funding for us to go ahead and if they don't receive the federal funding, we could go ahead and accelerate the Cedar Lane project, road project, and 36th Avenue Southeast, and construct those with bond funds only. So that would be 2 projects going forward with bonds funds only, and we received federal funds on 3 projects that had been planned to only receive bond funds. So, and this also helps us fill that gap between projects that we've received federal funding for, and these projects can take place in 2024 and 2025 and help us progress these projects. And then we would hit the years where we hope to receive the funding for Constitution and the Lindsay Street projects.
And is the 36th and Cedar Lane, is that still planned to be the 20-foot, raising it up 20 feet? And
Yeah, we're working on those plans now, but there's still raising that significantly. Because of the speeds of the road, you can only have slopes and so much rise and falls, and it's a pretty dramatic change both in those roadways. But yes, it is. It's going to be about a 20-foot fill at that intersection.
And the Destin's Landing development, that will be contributing to recoupment on that or not? Whenever it does start to develop, I guess.
Sure. I mean, that's something we would be looking at. They would be listed for recoupment, and it would be a matter of whether we filled them in that final recoupment determination.
Thanks.
So this is kind of a look at the years that were planned and the years that, the original construction year and the years that we now have planned based upon this proposal. So currently, this would allow us to have 11 projects under construction or complete by 2027. The original schedule did have 13 projects under construction or complete by 2027, but this is really getting us back on track by making this decision here. And one thing we want to really point out is we're not only looking at ACOG funding for this program. We have submitted these projects for grants. Gray Street had some increased costs, and we were awarded another $500,000 on top of the original ACOG funds to help us recoup that. And we will continue to submit for whatever programs, state or federal, or whatever we can get to bring in the funding for this program for the city of Norman.
We've also made raised grant applications. We're doing a Safe Roads for All grant application. So we are, as the money that we keep hearing about, as Anthony calls it, the money train from Washington, we keep waiting for it to get here, but every time we see a way that we can try to get some of that, we are making those applications as necessary. So we're going to continue on all projects to seek out any additional funding that we can to be able to balance the projects.
Perfect.
And so that kind of lands us on the the committee decision today is just to approve our use of using bond funds to progress at least 2 projects. I kind of dropped out the specifics here because there is still the possibility that Cedar Lane Road and 36 Southeast could get this federal funding, and we're submitting them for, but we want to progress at least 2 projects with bonds funds only within this program so that we can accelerate them and get them under construction to progress the program.
And Constitution has received federal?
It's
not.
Is not?
No, it is one of the ones that we hope will score really well with this fall's submission.
So you think also that when the Jenkins project is finished, that Constitution might score higher too?
I don't know how that affects scoring.
Yeah, that's kind of part of what we're all still
It's
juggling.
kind of like when we were struggling with 12th Avenue Southeast, and it was like once Cedar Lane project was finished, then 12th Avenue Southeast.
Yeah, because
it
it
was
kind of
only-
changed the traffic a little
Yeah.
bit. We're looking at that, the interesting thing with the Jenkins and Constitution is that we're taking part of the Constitution project into Jenkins to do the roundabout design. So there's a lot of variables there and a lot of things we're looking at, but we're really just trying to get everything balanced and leverage our funds the best that we can and try to complete projects as close to on time as feasibly possible.
Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're looking for some comments about direction. I do know I used to live kind of in the area of Cedar Lane and 36th, and 36 is one of those that is in critical need of updates. And I think our Ward 5 residents that live in that area would say the same thing. So I mean, especially for the program, and I think with our ability to secure funds and move things around and kind of be nimble in the program, I think it's important for us to continue moving forward and find the funds where we can. And then I do know that staff is always, always finding ways to backfill things or to utilize cost savings or other grants. So I would be in favor of shifting to continue to make sure that we're moving forward, because what we don't want to see is, what we have with 36 on the, other side, that we're many years down the road and voter approved, and we still hear about that. And so I think it's really important to deliver on the projects that, voters have approved for us to get done. So, I mean, and I know that the Turnpike is really it's the project that is looming over our heads that we don't have a lot of answers on, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel the same way. Whatever we need to do to get this program done the way voters have approved. So, any other comments, feedback? Okay. All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
And the item number 3 on our agenda this afternoon is a discussion regarding the urban design and implementation plan for the Center City Tax Increment Finance District. And let's see, and Scott is the.
I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
I just like it so much, I'm just going to hang out for a while. Start off with, at the last meeting in August, we had a lot of discussion about the infrastructure analysis, urban design and implementation plan. And I think there was a little bit of confusion. And that's why we brought it back to you as a committee, because we had concerns in making sure that we were meeting what you guys were really looking for. And that's why we brought it back to you. Well, like all good engineers do, we went back to the drawing board, threw everything away that was on it, and started over. My first call was to Johnson & Associates, and I was able to get hold of Tim Johnson, and he's been gracious enough to come down here today. And they actually did, when Cameron Brewer was speaking, he kept speaking about Project P180 and the work that was done on that. They were the leads on that project, the P180 and the urban design and implementation plan that was done on that. So they put some things together for us, and I'm going to ask Tim if he'd like to come, and I'm going to turn it over to him. This is Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates, and I'm going to let him kind of walk us through this and hopefully make sure that we're all on the same page, and then we can get a clear path moving forward. I'll start.
Tim Johnson, some of you might remember, we made a presentation on the city center project that was the predecessor to this, where we broke it down by basically blocks, so that you have a smorgasbord of, depending on where the development came, you could grab that block and say, this is the improvements we anticipate need to be done. And so when Scott explained to us that some of the urban things that you want to look at here, I said, well, we were heavily involved in P180, and Scott Howard with Howard Fairbairn Site Design was more heavily involved than I was, because he worked for more than just one engineering firm. And so, but we spent, Scott spent probably 10 years, I probably spent 7 years working on that project. It was a very, very in-depth project. So we thought we'd throw together some slides. So a little bit about us, some of the projects we've done is a lot of Bricktown work, all the canal, we designed the canal many, many years ago, 22 years ago. And a lot of walking public spaces, which really plays a role in how you want to address this urban area, is you want it to be a safe walking, heavily landscaped for the coolness and providing shade. And then we put the roads kind of on a diet, put the intersections on a diet. We determined that even in a downtown area like that, you don't need a 30-foot radius everywhere. You could do it with a smaller radius. And so we worked very hard on coming up with standards and details that I think we could reuse a lot of on this project that worked well down there. And Scott, go ahead and tell us about
Sure, yeah. I'm principal with HFSD. I started the company in 1988. So this is our 35th year being in business as a landscape architecture firm. We've had the opportunity to design numerous really large-scale projects throughout the city of Oklahoma City and other communities, from, as Tim mentioned, Project 180 to the Oklahoma City Convention Center, the Oklahoma City Boulevard, the Lower Bricktown Canal, Ped Plaza, and one of your favorites, Legacy Park here in Norman. So we've really been blessed to do a lot of really great projects.
So I touched a little bit on the history of this. I'm not going to go through these heavily because you guys have already had a long day. But this is a little summary, and Scott's got this report. But we worked with the Center for Economic Development Law, which Cameron Brewer worked for them at the time. He brought us in to help bolster their team and prepare all the engineering and costing that was done on that job. So I've already explained a little bit about the overview of that. This is really how we located it. We flew through. We didn't fly it. We did drive through it and videoed it all. And then we made some imagery of what we wanted it to look like in various areas. So that's from March. That looks upside down. Maybe not. March of 2015. We put this together really fast. So if you find something goofy, it's
That's
my
correct.
fault.
Yeah.
It's just the angle I've got my head at, I think. So floating down through there is some more imagery, but at the end of the day, that bottom slide was kind of the basis of the report. And so we talked a little bit about the experience and the knowledge, and it really ended up being probably a total of maybe 15 different consultants. And we collaborated together to make this work because the city wanted to, it was during a rough time. We were coming out of 2008, where the housing market tanked. And there was a lot of hungry engineers, and the city said, we've got this project, we want to spread it around. And so they carved it up into pieces or bid packages. But a lot of the consistency came from, we all drew together and came up with a standard for traffic. We came up with a standard for pavers, came up with a standard for designs on various streets for hardscape and softscape. We would randomly change different things like this street. It doesn't have the grates, but if you get into the heart of downtown on Park Avenue, there's tree grates. And it's really about the people moving in the area and how much room you have. Again, this was in front of City Hall. Part of our contract, we ended up doing the park in front of City Hall and the park in front of the Civic Center as well. And then all the roads that wrapped around this, and then a portion of Hudson. And it was just there was just a lot of stuff going on. We ended up working on 3 different projects as part of the 180 packaging. This is hard to read. I was given an example of how we broke our plans out. You know, we broke the sheets out, we had details, and we created actual, I'm sorry you can't see that, but I think Scott's got a slide you can see a little better. But so we had imagery like you would see from a landscape architect, that we would have street images showing we want trees, we want a bike lane, we want our lanes to be 11 feet. or in some cases, they were 10 feet. Well, we then took that image and created typical sections that would work through the whole project.
Yeah, and, as Tim mentioned, there were, I think, 8 engineering firms, and we were the lead landscape architecture firm. And because it was such a large-scale project, we brought in 3 other local landscape architects to work with us as sub-consultants. So to manage a project of this size and magnitude, this will put you to sleep, but we had to develop our own internal set of standards to, from nomenclature and just fonts, for all the reports we did. We were in charge of developing the standards from a documentation standpoint that was evident all the way through the plans. Go ahead. And one of the things about the Project 180, how it came about, is Devon Energy had made a decision. They were trying to weigh, do we stay here or do we move to Houston? So part of the decision for them to stay, they asked the city, okay, well, if we make this huge investment in the middle of downtown, we would like the surrounding areas of downtown to look just as nice, because we're going to have a premier facility. We want the downtown streetscapes to look the same. So they developed the TIF district, and Devon fronted much of the money to fund the implementation of all these projects. So go back.
I can.
Yeah, I was going to show you on the image on the left is several different studies that we developed, for the amenity zone of the streetscape areas. And this happens to be part of the areas where there was high pedestrian traffic, and so we have tree grades. And we get really into the weeds of how the pavers are aligned and where the decorative pavements occur. So we developed those standards, and then off to the right, this graphic shows 3 different scenarios where we implemented different soil mediums for all the street trees. We have like over 2,000 street trees throughout the whole Project 180 area. And this area right down here in the lighter green color, we have a structural soil system that uses very little soil. It was developed by Cornell University. And so the city said, well, let's approach that, let's try it out. And then the blue area is a Silvacell system where it's mostly a linear soil trench that really provides an ideal setting for the root zone of street trees. And it also has a capacity to support the weight of pavers and pavements on top of it. So you really had this ideal situation for the root zone of those trees. And then as we got further into the project, money is tightening up a little bit. The orange area ends up being just a traditional soil trench of topsoil. And then this is an example. On the left is some of our construction documents for a particular section of the street where we've got the street trees shown, the planted areas or tree grade areas, and just the detailing that goes along with that. Again, getting into the pay quantity items, things like that you would see in your construction document phase of work. And then I believe this is TEC. Tim, correct me.
Yeah, that was our
traffic
intersection on
engineering.
Walker and Dean McGee. So again, that's how we collaborated. Because they wanted to build this so fast, they had TEC come in and do all the traffic standards and coordinated with all of the other consultants.
And we talked a little bit about details. Again, what we ended up doing, or what the city ended up doing, we had a whole booklet of construction documents and details, and the city was trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to implement it. So the city actually adopted the details as their own city details. So that way, if you have multiple engineer consultants, they would be using and pulling from the city standards. But we have a lot of different applications for, street tree plantings, paver sections, things like that. And then again, getting back to, just the aesthetics, you've got a lot of different areas of the city you've got business zones, you've got residential zones. How do you treat each zone? Because each area is different. I mean, you've got, you know, the neighborhood section, you want maybe a quiet street with improving walkability and having sidewalks through the neighborhoods that connect into the downtown core. And then when you get into the downtown core, do you want to slow the traffic down, again, to improve walkability, make the area safer? You narrow the streets, create bump outs at intersections, if you have the ability or room to do that, so you narrow that zone that pedestrians are having to cross the street. Creating the street tree buffer from the roadway and the sidewalk area. That's what we call the amenity zone. And that also became our transition grade-wise from an ADA standpoint. So your sidewalk zone is really your ADA zone, and then if we had to make up increased slopes, the amenity zone is where that picked up, so.
And as a result, all the new sidewalk that was built down there is all ADA accessible.
And then, I'm sorry, the image on the,
Sorry.
keep doing that to you.
Now I gotta figure out how to go backwards again. Here we go. One more.
Yeah, I was just gonna show, this is how the project was broken up into the 8 different packages with 8 different engineering firms. So I made you go through all that work. just for that.
You could have just said that.
I wanted to show some examples of some of the graphic capabilities that we have in presenting, what the project can look like before it's actually built. And this is the Oklahoma City Boulevard. We did the middle section from Western to Broadway. It's a very formal section, and it's almost, I would say, the suburban part of downtown where there's a lot of areas that haven't filled in yet, because that section of roadway is where the old I-40 used to be when it was elevated. So the streetscape, it's like build it and they will come. So we're really hoping soon that businesses will build in and infill the areas beyond it. But again, we've got decorative pavements, street trees. There's some sections that have parallel parking. And I think this was part of a study of some gateway markers and things like that. But the images really help convey the idea of what your streetscapes can look like. And then again, getting back to developing standards and setting a palette of materials, from plant materials to, again, gateway markers and the different styling and concepts that you can have. And again, that's something that's important to work with your committee to find out what is desired in each of these areas and how can we help make that happen for you. And again, just more of elevation studies. These are gateway markers that the city decided that these may be leaning more towards an artistic component, and they may want to pursue that through the Arts Commission and handle that in a different way. So those were not implemented, but the streetscape was.
So just in summary, you're asking yourself, well, why are we telling you all this stuff? Well, when Scott and I got to talking, I explained to him, this is what it takes to get that started. The city needs to have a plan that can be developed, and it can be then parceled out to a private consultant. It could be one of your other consultants that does your other road designs, or it could be us, or, but you have a set of standards then so it gets built block by block or 2 blocks at a time. But when it's all done, it's all cohesive. It looks like it was all thought through, because it was. And then each block or each portion of the Center City area could have a marker to describe, this is our business area. We just don't know how that's going to develop yet. So anyway, any questions for us?
More comments than anything.
Councilor Schuler?
I think that this is exactly what we were hoping for. I think for this area, speaking to the phasing, being able to show anybody who buys property in the area to say like these are the improvements that you can expect if you purchase this property, and then we move forward. And so like there's been this kind of like chicken egg type conversation about like how do you spur redevelopment in the area if people don't know what investments the city is going to make. So being able to have kind of all of those drawings and the schemes and kind of having conversations about where road diets make sense and walkability, and we think that's something that we're really critically wanting to look at. And I think attached to our agenda we have the cost estimate for doing this. And so I know that this can be, we have TIF funds that are currently sitting there, and to my recollection, we have already appropriated $100,000 for something like this, and so that is we're already basically halfway to the proposal that you have at like 218,000. So, and we could make up the other portion of that with TIF funds that we currently have sitting in the bank. So personally, I would like to see this move forward so that we can kind of get an idea of what we're gonna do infrastructure-wise in Center City and start getting some of these projects to kick off, to revitalize that area.
Councilmember Grant?
Yeah, same. I would like to see it move forward. The note I made was the city standards for consultants. That was the highlight for me, so.
Yeah, I made that note too.
Yeah, I agree. Having been involved with this Center City for almost a decade now, a lot's changing in there for sure, and a lot of work has been done, but I think a cohesive, comprehensive implementation plan like this is necessary. And so I'm good with moving forward with it to the rest of council. Councilmember Nash?
So do you have experience with, and is this a situation where permaculture should make an appearance?
Yeah.
Is-
Got some
Evan
permaculture
Dunn's
advocates
here.
in Norman, so
Yes.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Okay.
I would say for sure.
Let's conversations about what kinds of street trees we put in and landscaping and
Absolutely, yeah.
the
and
importance of that.
I didn't mention, but, we obviously didn't go with a monoculture of tree species, that we did break it up. I think we probably have 20 different species of trees, trying to pick species that, because if they're in pedestrian environments, that they have no seed if possible, or the smallest seed. But we went with improved cultivars, very urban tolerant street trees that will handle the pollution and the heat island effect. Just not picking a delicate ornamental, picking something that's tried and true and that's going to withstand the abuses it might endure.
Councilmember Grant?
I did have one question. So what about utilities and let's just say power lines or maybe outdated infrastructure that should go?
It's a very good question. And something that the city didn't think, not to throw them under the bus, I think that they thought their infrastructure was in better shape than it was. When we exposed some things, it was determined that, the water line in this area is 110 years old. We think we better go ahead and replace it, otherwise we'll be tearing out 8 inches of concrete or 9 inches of concrete. And so as the program evolved, we started using utility funds to piecemeal that as it went. And so at the end of the day, we have all new water lines under the city streets. Because your buildings in that part of Oklahoma City, they're built up to the property line. And although some of those right-of-ways are 100 feet, a lot of them are 60 and 80. And so you have a lot of stuff crowded under the road. And so we coordinated that with ONG, OG&E, Cox. There are pipelines, there are old Phillips lines under the roads. So there was a lot of coordination. A lot of this upfront work will take several meetings with utility companies to identify, locate, and find where all the lines are so that we can address them.
And that's the planning part of it is what's important, because if you're trying to create street tree planting zone, we can't plant on top of utility lines. So that all has to be coordinated and placed in the proper locations so that we can have the ideal situation.
And of course, the original impact, infrastructure analysis did account for water, sewer, and storm. Really did not anticipate at that time electric underground, but in this area, that's primarily in the alleyways. So it's kind of a different animal than what we see in a lot of areas. But I think that we probably need to concentrate, and we probably want to go back and look at what the actual TIF language is before we started considering the electric lines.
Or not even just like I mean, that's another conversation. But I was thinking about a substation on Comanche. But yeah, is that something that we have to go back and look at the TIF ballot language?
We probably need to, I'd want to spend some time with that and work with our legal team on that to make sure that we are addressing that appropriately.
Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we do have, I remember seeing the kind of the phasing of all of the utilities, and we've had conversations, and we did one of those projects on University for the Noun Hotel.
We did a
Wasn't
small
that-
section of
wasn't
the
that
storm
part of-
sewer.
Yeah,
And it was a very small section, just to be able to get it to connect because the connection pipe there wasn't adequate. So we did do a small section, use a small amount of those funds in that location.
right,
Yes,
so we
did.
do have that, like you're saying, we do have the infrastructure piece of
It's,
this.
yeah, when you look at that, each sheet for each area, it's got storm, water, sewer, roadway, and streetscape, if I remember. If I remember, those are all the ones that are incorporated in there. So that was all kind of incorporated in that early work that was done by Johnson Associates.
Yeah. So I just see this layering on top of that, and it gives us a better understanding of what the design is, and having a standard, as you say, for how these projects kind of come forward. And I think it's helpful to kind of see some of the design, so that people, I think it's really hard sometimes for some people to see what the vision is going to be without some of those renderings and kind of beautification type things.
And does this will be updating the infrastructure analysis to account for development that's happened since then?
Yes, and cost increases.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay.
Well, staff we'll begin working on bringing this to full council as an item.
All right.
Thank you all for letting us come up.
We appreciate you
Thank you very
coming.
much.
Thank you so much. All right, well, that is the last item on our agenda. I will go ahead and mention this bridge meeting once more. There will be a community meeting October 4th here at City Hall, 5:30 PM to 7. City staff will be giving a presentation, doing question and answers on the bridge bond program before the vote on October 10th. So encourage all residents that are interested in that to attend, or I assume it'll probably be on YouTube perhaps too as well. So, okay, any final thoughts, questions, anything like that? Okay, thank you all very much. We are adjourned.